They say every neighborhood has that one person who takes the HOA rules way too seriously, but in my neighborhood, that one person came with a name everyone dreaded, Karen. I'd already seen plenty of her ridiculous restrictions before, from the ban on Christmas lights after January 2nd to the no vehicles parked facing the wrong way, fine that cost my neighbor $50 just because he backed into his own driveway, but nothing could have prepared me for the notice that landed in my mailbox on a hot Sunday afternoon in July. It looked official, folded neatly, stapled at the corner like it was some government-issued warrant, and when I opened it, I nearly dropped the rib I was eating. In bold letters it read, "Effective immediately, all grilling and outdoor BBQs are strictly prohibited. Smoke and meat odors disrupt community harmony and wellness. Violators will be fined $250 per incident." I actually laughed so hard I coughed, half because of the absurdity, half because BBQ sauce had gone down the wrong pipe. There I was, standing on my back porch, rib bone in one hand, sauce dripping on my shirt, and in the other, Karen's homemade, law outlawing BBQs. For a split second, I thought maybe it was a prank. But no, this was midsummer, and Karen had been talking for months about how she wanted the neighborhood to go healthier and greener, so it fit her brand of nonsense. Perfectly. Still, I figured she'd send out the notice and then move on to harassing kids riding skateboards. Wrong. A week later, Karen rolled out something she called smoke patrols. Imagine this: a 40-something woman in a neon HOA vest, clutching what looked like a store-bought smoke detector, walking around the block like some kind of BBQ bounty hunter. If she caught even a faint whiff of smoke, or heaven forbid saw steam rising from a grill, she'd jot it down on her clipboard, and the next morning, a $250 fine would appear taped to your door in bright orange paper. The first time I saw her pacing around with that gadget, I thought she was losing her mind. The second time, I realized she'd actually lost it. Neighbors started whispering in frustration. One guy got slapped with a fine because his kids roasted marshmallows over a tiny fire pit. Another lady was fined because Karen swore she smelled hot dogs from inside her kitchen window. The insanity was spreading like wildfire. And of course, I wasn't spared. I hosted a small Saturday cookout with a few friends. Nothing crazy, just burgers, hot dogs, and some ribs. I figured it's my backyard, my property, my grill. But sure enough, Sunday morning I woke up to an orange slip stuck under my doormat. Unauthorized BBQ activity detected? Fine, $250. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. I wasn't about to let Karen police my dinner menu. But that was just the beginning. The more we ignored her, the more aggressive she became. By the second week, Karen was out there twice a day, waving her smoke detector around like she was ghost hunting. By the third week, she started bragging about how she had evidence, stored in binders, little notes about which house smelled like sausages and at what time. The whole neighborhood was fed up, but Karen was only getting started. One night, she stormed up to my fence mid-BBQ, clipboard clutched tight, and shouted, "Shut it down or I'm calling the police!" I told her flat out, "Go ahead, Karen, call them. I'll even save them a plate." Her eyes lit up like she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment. She stomped away, phone in hand, muttering something about law enforcement backup. I leaned back in my chair, spatula still in hand, thinking, well, this ought to be good. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights cut through the night. Sirens wailed, and neighbors poured onto their lawns like it was a street performance. Phones came out, people started recording, and there I stood by my grill flipping burgers, waiting for the show to start. Karen ran up to the officers like a contestant on a game show, waving her clipboard in the air and shouting about illegal grilling, smoke violations, and community wellness ordinances. The cops just stared at her, eyebrows raised, before looking at me and then back at her. One finally asked, "Ma'am, what crime exactly are you reporting?" She shoved one of her orange violation slips into his hand and declared proudly, "He's breaking the HOA law against BBQs. He's cooking ribs. Ribs." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, like a dam breaking, both officers started laughing. One even asked, "You called us for ribs?" Karen's face turned beet red, but she doubled down, ranting about toxic meat fumes and dangerous grill fires. And then she made the mistake that would come back to bite her. She admitted, right there in front of everyone, that she'd been sneaking into people's backyards to collect smoke samples and sniffing around fences at night for evidence. The cops froze. "So you're saying you trespassed on private property?" one officer asked slowly. Karen's smug grin faltered. The crowd of neighbors gasped before bursting into laughter, some even shouting things like, "Looks like you're the one who's cooked, Karen." That's where part one ends, with Karen standing there, clipboard trembling, police staring her down, and the entire neighborhood laughing like they'd just witnessed the downfall of the BBQ police. The look on Karen's face that night was priceless, like someone had just pulled the rug out from under her carefully built empire of clipboards and violation slips. And while the officers didn't slap cuffs on her, they made it crystal clear she was out of line, telling her in front of half the neighborhood that trespassing was illegal, harassment was a crime, and she had absolutely zero legal authority to regulate what people cooked in their own yards. And that warning hit her harder than any fine she'd ever dreamed up. But the best part was watching her deflate like a balloon losing air as the crowd of neighbors started chanting BBQ, BBQ, and clapping like it was some kind of backyard concert. And me, I just flipped another burger onto the grill with the biggest grin on my face because I knew right then and there Karen's grip on the HOA was cracking. Over the next week, the neighborhood buzzed like a hornet's nest, everyone sharing the videos online, some of them going semi-viral on Facebook and TikTok with captions like, "HOA, Karen tries to ban BBQ, ends up roasted," and the more people watched, the more support the neighbors felt. Like we weren't just individuals anymore, but a united front against her nonsense. And that's when talk started about the next HOA meeting, because people were done being bullied, done paying fake fines, done dealing with smoke patrols at midnight, and they wanted change. By the time the meeting rolled around, the room was packed, folding chairs filled, neighbors spilling into the hallway, all of them holding copies of Karen's ridiculous notices, as if they were holding evidence for trial, and Karen, still trying to cling to power, stood at the front with her clipboard, barking about community health, harmony, and wellness. But no one was buying it anymore, and when she tried to scold a neighbor for cheering too loud, the crowd erupted in laughter, a sound that rattled her to her core. Then the vote came, and it was unanimous. Not a single hand raised in her favor. The entire board removed her as HOA president right there on the spot, her clipboard falling to the floor with a smack as if the universe itself was punctuating her downfall, and she stormed out red-faced, muttering about lawsuits that everyone knew she'd never file. The very next weekend, the neighborhood held the most glorious cookout in history, grills lined up on driveways, smoke rising like victory banners, the smell of ribs, burgers, hot dogs, and brisket filling the air so thick you could taste the freedom, kids running around with corn on the cob, adults clinking beers and laughing about the meat police, and me, I stood at the center flipping steaks with a spatula in one hand and a cold drink in the other, the unofficial host of a rebellion-turned-celebration. Someone even brought a karaoke machine, and when a neighbor jokingly sang "Burn, Baby, Burn," the whole block howled with laughter. Karen's house sat dark and silent that night, curtains drawn, no clipboard in sight, and while a few people swore they saw her peeking through the blinds, no one cared anymore. Because she wasn't in charge, she wasn't feared, she wasn't the queen of fines and memos anymore. She was just Karen, the woman who tried to outlaw BBQ and ended up humiliated by her own arrogance. That cookout turned into a tradition, a yearly reminder that no single person, clipboard or not, gets to dictate how a community lives, eats, or laughs, and every time the smell of smoke wafts down the street, it's like a silent message, a collective memory that says loud and clear, we stood up, we pushed back, and we won. And me? Well, every time I bite into a rib with sauce dripping down my fingers, I can't help but smirk and think, Karen wanted to ban BBQ, but in the end, she's the only one who got grilled. The end.